Hello fellow gamers and welcome back. Here is as always Captain Sedaris.
Hi guys.
And from the other side of the planet is joining us Westley, the project lead of Star Trek Armada 4.
Hi everybody.
How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Oh, a little bit tired. Here is it already 11, so it's late, but I'm curious about your project.
Oh yeah.
Well, I appreciate you staying up for our project.
I think it's worth it.
Well, we are gamers. We're used to staying up late.
So, I guess you guys are probably going to want to know a little bit about Armada 4. But I wanted to ask first if you guys were familiar with an old mod for Armada 2 called Fleet Operations.
Oh yeah. Just played it yesterday actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. I haven't been able to play in a couple of years, and I'm always worried that the community isn't still there, and it's just kind of nice to know that it's still going.
Well, it's smaller of course like many older games, but the game is still just nice. The only thing that bothers me is if you're playing it on 4K, the menu is getting really small, but that's about all. Works rather well. No, but actually I have no idea what's going on with Armada 4, so I'm really the noob here, so I'm really curious, because I know Armada 1, 2, and the Armada 3 mod for Sins of a Solar Empire, and would be really keen on getting my hands on a new Armada. So I'm all ears.
Alrighty, well, I'm gonna kind of have to be upfront and say, unfortunately, it's been pretty slow the past couple of years. I'm just gonna start off by saying I'm in medical school, and my plan, and plans never seem to go as you had hoped, was to finish before I started med school. I had about a half a year where I was just gonna work 1 day a week and just crank this out. But then the pandemic hit, and so a lot of work has been done. But I'm kind of here trying to see if there's anyone who would be willing to or interested in potentially working on this project with me to help actually get a release date viable someday.
You mentioned you started a while ago. When was it exactly?
I started this project in 2018. I was taking a big standardized test to get into medical school, and I needed like a release. And I was a huge fan of Fleet Ops. I love playing Fleet Ops. That's how I stayed sane. And there had been a long time, about 5 years, I believe, since there had been a Fleet Ops patch. And I had a teacher in college, a genetics teacher, who just decided to start his own video game studio on campus. And I had video skills and like 3D modeling skills. It was a hobby of mine. And he kind of knew that I was someone who knew genetics and sort of like some 3D art and film. And so he invited me to his video game studio. And I was surprised at how versatile and the tools were, and that's kind of how I started kind of getting my feet wet in video game programming and seeing what it was all about. And so summer 2018, I made a prototype. I spent 2 months and cranked out most of the features that I had wanted. It just was sort of an exercise where I learned that anything that I wanted to do Armada-wise was possible for someone like me with going in with knowing very little. That being said, my code was spaghetti code. It was not good. And so I started over from scratch. And so that way it would be more streamlined and organized.
Don't feel bad about that. That's not uncommon actually for professionals too. I mean, if you have been doing this for 20 years, of course you will make less mistakes, but it's rare that your first approach is the perfect one, and that's just it. Don't feel bad about it at all.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And, I really wanted it to be something that I could collaborate with people on. And so I made a point to go back and rebuild a lot of stuff, kind of spend a lot of time on the very foundational stuff that wasn't really the most interesting about it. Like make the camera move good, make the fog of war actually not cause severe lag that your computer freezes and stuff like that. And so I just kind of sort of recreated the whole approach to a lot of things and made it much more optimal, but I'm nowhere near as far as I was after that 2 months.
Maybe we should get one step back. What's actually the goal behind it? Do you want to make a game that is solely multiplayer, or should it also have the capability of doing single player campaigns? What are you striving for?
I'm someone who likes to just try to reach for everything, but if I were to prioritize it, definitely multiplayer. I enjoyed playing Fleet Ops with my friends, and that has been kind of one of the hardest things to wrap my brain around. There's Unity. I'm using the Unity engine, And right now, they don't have like an actual official multiplayer supported thing. And so the first thing I did was try to learn various networking and multiplayer things. And that seems to be the biggest hurdle as far as making the game goes. But it is to me the most important part of the project. So
for someone who is not into this engine, does it have some sort of library for network connections, or do you really have to do it from scratch?
when I first started, it did have a library, but it has since been depreciated because they're going to overhaul the whole system, and Unity themselves are not happy with their system. So I've been using this pretty good solid. I started using this pretty good solid third-party free library. The one really good thing about Unity is that so many people use it, and there's all sorts of code and forums and helpful people to kind of get you pointed in a direction and assets. And so I forget the exact name of it. I think Forge Networking, and so I'm gonna try and employ that system, but we're just barely getting back into getting network capability. But I kind of like the old way of doing things, of connecting. I don't think I have the money to fund like a massive server for like $2,000 a month where players can play, and so it might have to be like we have with Fleet Ops, where we fake virtual area networks using things like Machi or things.
I'm not even sure if this is necessary, because if you ask me, I know you didn't. If you have the ability to connect to some server directly, this is actually what's lacking in Armada 1. That you can enter an IP address or maybe a port and connect to someone. This is something you cannot do. If you have this ability, it's already a very good foundation. On top of that, there might only be a lobby or master server interesting, but that's about it. If you look at Elite Force, for example, everybody can put up a server and you can connect directly to the server. And if you want to, you can advertise it to a master server, which doesn't have to really carry a lot of load.
Are you saying like a separate server client, sort of like with Minecraft, that people can connect to and put up themselves?
Either this or a spontaneously put up server. That would be just fine enough.
Yeah, that's something I'm also thinking about, but it would require figuring out how to make a build or a separate Unity project, I believe, that could make a separate client.
But let's not get into this kind of...
It's
just an idea I had, because I know Armada and I know Elite Force and know how they did it and what the problems with both approaches are, and just popping in, so to say.
I believe I was investigating that, and I had someone doing a lot of really good research for me, helping out the project that way. But yeah, it's very complex, and that's the one probably area that I need to wrap my brain more around. Everything else that Armada you could do in Armada, I've thought of solutions for. I think I know a good way to implement it. It's just the networking stuff that always is the most complicated for me.
So that basically answers my next question. What is more time consuming, the artwork or technical development? I guess the technical side is definitely the bigger part.
I'd just like to take this opportunity and say that fortunately, I am really good on the artwork side of things. When I first kind of approached the Armada 4 devs, I kind of just showed them some stuff I was doing, and I had used a couple of their assets, just not really thinking that it would go anywhere. I was just kind of a college kid playing around, seeing what I could do in Unity engine. I sent them what I had done, and they got really excited and were really supportive and said that I could use all of their assets. And so I have all the ships and things from them and art from them that I could ever wish for. So yeah, I don't really have to do very much on the art side, maybe on the UI side, but I still do it occasionally because I kind of want a few of my own designs, and that's kind of a way to, sick of coding. I kind of came into this from the side of 3D modeling. That was my skill before. It's sort of something that I do to de-stress, I guess, from all the coding.
It's actually very important. I feel much the way you describe it. There are certain barriers when you're coding, and after a while your brain simply shuts down and no more of this. And if you have the ability to hop tasks and do different things, this really helps.
You're absolutely right, and your brain is just designed to be working on these problems in the background, and it's really good, especially with coding. When your eyes start to get crossed because you've been staring at these lines of code for too long, to kind of just step back, and your brain will be working on the problem, and then you'll be doing something else, and then you'll have that eureka moment where that part of your brain finally.
The toilet effect, yeah. You go
Yeah.
to the toilet, or you're standing in the shower doing something where your brain has absolutely nothing to do, and all of a sudden, there it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's kind of funny because I'm a med student, and so I might have like a test in 2 hours, and all of a sudden my brain has just come up with several solutions for Armada 4, and I'm like, quick, write it down. No, I shouldn't be doing
Yeah,
this right
yeah,
now.
yeah. I noticed, or very nice also laying in the bed in the evening, trying to get rest, trying to get to sleep, and all of a sudden, it's a river of ideas. Right
It's
now, at 5 minutes before I want to go to bed.
I have all these apps and devices that just like as soon as I get an idea, you write it down before you forget it because you will.
Yeah, you most certainly will. For the same reason, I have my smartphone around most of the time, and at least have something where you can type in your ideas. That's the very minimum.
For me, that's been my Discord server. I have tons of ideas, and I'm sure if I go back through them, I'm going to be like, how am I ever going to implement all this? But
Oh yeah.
it's good to have like an idealized version of
Yeah,
you.
the funny thing is when it starts to be becoming a lot of ideas, the structuring of that. That's the next challenge.
Oh yes, I need structuring. If there's anyone out there willing to be like take a leadership role in this project, who's much better at it than me, more organized. So even if you don't know how to program, if you're interested in this project, we could use people with leadership skills or people who can like figure out prioritization skills.
You already mentioned some helping hands in the project, but can you tell us maybe how many developers you can call as assistants?
Well, I got two people right now who contributed. One of them is, he's a guy who professionally codes in C Sharp, which is what Unity uses. So he's very helpful to have around. He kind of goes through and like optimizes some things, tells us if like a convention isn't being used right, and just tries to streamline things even further. And then we have another gentleman who I think I might have lost to. I think he's been called into service.
It's a hard time doing work like that.
Yeah, and so he is someone with a physics and aeronautical engineering major, and it's been awesome to have. I made a bunch of tutorials for him, which he said that I can release to the public, and as of today, I have. So just kind of explaining how the whole project is coded and works. He started off as someone who didn't know coding, but with Unity, it's really it's surprising how easy it is to learn coding and to get really intermediate to advanced really fast. It's just a great platform to kind of just get that skill really fast. And so I spent about half a year training him, and he made a really cool movement system. He decided to upgrade the aesthetic of the way ships move because he's a physics engineering person, and so he was like, I don't like the way that RTS pathfinding works, so I just kind of want the ships to kind of actually move a little bit more like they would in space. And so he very meticulously focused on this very
Yeah, but it's important.
project. Oh yeah, it really adds a lot. And so last we left off, he was trying to add that to we use Git, and that's how we can kind of collaborate and share the project with people. And it's sort of like saving a video game project status. How familiar you or everyone is with like things like Git, or for the way computer science folks work on projects and track changes across multiple files. But it sort of saves your progress, and you can kind of go back if you really mess something up. Say you change a value, or you change some code, or something horrible happens to the project and it's not working anymore. You can kind of like save your progress and go back to it.
Yeah, proper branching. Mess around with it if you have to, and if you have a problem with it, you can go back, of course.
And so he made this elaborate system, but I don't know if he's gone into service and was able to get. It's very hard to reach him at this point, sadly. And so I don't know if he was able to. I have the current version of the game, and I think some of the stuff that he had implemented is there, but I don't know if all the bells and whistles he had programmed for months is there.
And talking a bit about the scope of the project, what do you say? How big will this be? How many factions and features you could imagine?
Yeah, that's the thing where I'm really trying to definitely get to what you had with Armada. And if possible, I would like to even take it a step further. So right now, my approach is sort of like, all right, here are the things that I definitely need to have first. But I know down the road there are things that I want to expand this way. And if I can ever get that far, be lucky enough to get that far. So I've laid the groundwork to have multiple maps. So with Armada, you have one big sort of rectangular map that you can kind of explore. I thought it might be interesting to play around with maybe some sort of like Dominion War campaign where you could have multiple star systems that were like little tiny maps and like a galaxy view.
It's funny because this actually is what the Armada 3 mod for Sins of a Solar Empire adds on top, but it lacks this detail, like there's an asteroid field and here's a black hole, and it's more like a star system view, but it lacks the nice features, so to say. There's a nebula, here are some stones and stuff like that, and a mixture of both would be really nice.
Exactly. I love that about Armada 3. I think Armada 3 was one thing that inspired me for this. But the one thing that you can't do with Armada 3 is that it's very hard to. Fleet ops players, we like to call it micromanage our ships.
Yeah.
Be able to go and like, no, you do this. No. Like, I feel like you lack control, that fine control in Armada 3.
It already begins when you jump to another star system. You never know exactly where the entry point into a new star system actually is. Is it more to the left or more to the right of the line? You don't know.
Yeah, so if I could do that, if I could kind of have it would be more like rather than a bunch of like circles on a map, it would be more like probably rectangular squares. But that's kind of what I was thinking. It would be like stepping stones, I guess. You can only go to warp in between them. Something that was controversial in Armada 2, I believe, was the warp system, and I kind of fully agree with the Fleet Ops devs in removing warp. But I do think cosmetically it would be kind of cool to have in the game. So we've thought of ways to implement it where if you were far away if you were sort of just like in an empty part of the map, your ship might have like a warp animation so that you could sort of pretend that your ship is warping to this other part of the map.
You already mentioned a little bit the aspect that there is some playable content. Do you know when there is a first release, a demo, so to speak?
Something about playable content. Okay, so I did have a version, a prototype of the game back in 2018. Unfortunately, I'm not nearly as far along as I was in that prototype. If I were to release anything right now, it would be, you could click and move some ships and see some pretty cool objects. Ships would move in a cool way, and you'd have good camera movement. But kind of as I was saying, life has just gotten really busy. I study 24/7 weekends, and so it's just kind of like a really intense part of my life at the moment. I'm hoping to get some more time. Our last year of med school, I hear, is a lot more lax than this, and so I'm hoping to kind of do what I can here and there. But unless I'm able to kind of recruit more people at this point, there's no definitive release date for many years from now.
Well, in general, when we are to subject, what kind of people do you think you would need? I mean, now you have the opportunity here, reaching out to some people. We have done this before. What kind of support do you think you need? What kind of skills or what direction of the project or what aspects of the project do you think you really need some more help with, aside from, of course, more time?
Yeah, free time would be great. Someone who is like really passionate about Star Trek, someone really willing to learn. You don't necessarily need to know coding at all. I was a biological major, and I learned this stuff, and I learned how to be pretty decent with code pretty fast with Unity. And the same thing happened to the other dev who's currently indisposed by the military right now. So if you're passionate about Star Trek, if you're passionate about Armada, and you really just want to be a part of a project, and creating a successor to a game you love, you can do it. And I have already made a lot of resources and have tons of tutorials for people who would be interested in learning. So I'm really interested in people who are willing to learn, have more time than I have, and also someone who would be kind of interested in handling more part of the coordination, like, between different members of the team, figuring out like, all right, how to delegate better. So yeah, I'm someone at this point who can tell you ways that you could go about implementing any feature, and very willing to help guide and teach people who want to learn this. I just don't have the time at the moment to. It's really frustrating for me because it's like I know how to do this, I just don't have the time right now, and so you know, anyone who's just really who wants to be of help and service to the project, there's lots of we first of all we need an actual team, so
Yeah, of course, that would help.
like right now it's like what kind of team members are you looking for? I'm like I'm looking for team members in general and people who are passionate about this, and because I think that that's like the most important thing. Like if you love Star Trek and you love Armada, you're going to want to make something good, and you're going to find a way to learn the things you need to learn.
Well, looking at it from a completely different angle, as I'm sure you are aware, CBS or Paramount aren't exactly happy campers when it comes to using Star Trek for some sort of community films or projects. I mean, there are a lot of intellectual property holders which act like this. How do you plan on approaching that problem?
Yeah, and I will say that that was probably one of the biggest. So after really working hard on that first prototype, something that was popular around at that time, I believe, was Stage 9. And they got taken down right at about that point. And kind
Yeah.
of seeing that happen really discouraged me. And so, as far as that goes, my plan has been to follow the sort of fleet ops model. So, officially, this is a mod. Behind the scenes, you're really kind of creating it, in a different engine, sort of from scratch, But the way that I was gonna try to satisfy CBS was to make it so that way, if you wanted to play this game, you have to have an install of Armada 1 or 2, since it's gonna use a lot of kind of the sounds from those games.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of open source projects out there which, so to say, created their own open source engine, but the assets are actually taken from the original game, recreating actually the very same game, but with a completely different engine. But still, without the assets, you can't do anything with them. What I was thinking about is doing it the other way around, kind of doing a game that in essence is Star Trek Armada, but just not under the Star Trek Armada label.
Yeah.
And the actual Star Trek content, as you said, could be taken from an original game, would be a mod for your game. So this way, your actual game would not be in trouble legally. And if someone miraculously would create a mod for this, well, that's it.
I've had this exact same conversation several times. That's hilarious. One solution was if CBS or Paramount now were upset by this, the solution would be to create a very highly moddable game of not a Star Trek IP, but some folks would find the game easily moddable so that they could make it Star Trek if they wanted to.
I mean, if you look at Sins of a Solar Empire, it's pretty much the same story. It's a completely different game, actually. And you use the game mechanics and create some Armada from it, and it actually works pretty fine. But if you do it the other way around, actually designing the game to be Armada, but not being Armada, well, what are they supposed to do about it?
Yeah. And, to be fair, I'm not selling this at all. This isn't going to be something that you're going,
Yeah.
Like, they make a little bit of money, I think, the people who make Sins of a Solar Empire. But yeah, I wasn't going to ask for donations.
It's definitely safer that way.
Yeah. That was kind of like, my plan is like, okay, yeah, I'm not like making anyone pay for this financially. I'm not asking for donations. I'm not trying to like get any money from this whatsoever. Hopefully that's enough. Worst case scenario, it'd be really nice if CBS or Paramount were to actually look at what the cult following that games like Armada and Elite Force had and make like an actual true successor to that too.
Oh yeah. This is something we had talked about here also a lot of times. If there is a content creator like yourself creating a new content for a franchise, you can approach this in 3 ways. You can simply ignore it. Okay, nothing done. You can actually fight it, which has happened a lot of times. Or you can try to incorporate it into your own portfolio. Why not do the latter? Why not try and kind of hire the guy? I mean, there's someone who is highly motivated to create new content which would add to your own portfolio. And why not pay the guy? Why not make it part of what you're doing?
Why not just take that guy's work that is going to probably create a product with more passion than if you were to kind of handle people who maybe didn't absolutely, like grew up with this game and love this game. And so why not just like be like, all right, we'll let you go by if we can just take your game and maybe we can modify it to our needs, and then we'll make money off of it. Like that seems like the best solution, doesn't it?
I mean, there's only one catch. The team would also have to agree with it. All the contributors should have to agree, because I know from another game where this happened, where the founder, so to say, decided, well, let's rip off of this nice game and make something completely new from it. And the community was really, really pissed about it, because it was their work, of course. And if you're in the position of someone who has contributed to a project and you see someone else making money from it, then I can understand why someone like that wouldn't be happy about it. So it's a little bit tricky, but if you know this is part of the roadmap, if you know this is coming, completely different story. Then you can still decide, well, I'm not investing any time here anymore, or you can go on and invest.
But I guess in Star Trek it would be a little bit different, because, well, it's Star Trek. I guess every developer, every fan would be happy if it would be part of the official canon, the official Star Trek game line.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
And if we would get some, let's say, compensation. I'm not talking about a real contract where you work your hours and get the money from, but some sort of compensation that would really do for most people who are doing this kind of work.
That would look a lot better.
Yeah. I mean, you could, for example, cut back in hours at your daytime work and do this project, being paid for it.
Yeah, I don't know if I would. Given the choice, I would back away from that. But, I do hope to maybe be in a field where I do have time for passion projects.
Yeah. No, I meant it in a more generalized fashion. If I look at myself, I'm not working full 40 hours a week. I mean, many Americans would laugh about that, because 40 hours is not a lot for them.
We're secretly jealous.
Yeah, I can imagine. But in Germany, it's normal. That there are certain laws that prevent you from working too many hours a day in a week. And actually, I'm still lower than that, but standard is somewhere around 40 hours. But imagine you would have the situation where you can go to your boss and say, well, may I cut back to, let's say, 6 hours a day, and the rest of the time, another 10 hours I can invest each week in a project like that one, because I'm at least a little bit financially compensated for it. That would be something that a model that could work. You're doing your passion. We just had another interview here where our guest said, follow your passion. And this is exactly the kind of thinking. Follow your passion. Create a nice product which will be awesome, because someone who really, really wants to make it have quality is investing his time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be the dream right there, actually. Unfortunately, I'm not going to get into it too much, but my healthcare system is probably going to not allow that. It's quite a busy job. But, when I've still found a way to make progress here and there. So, when you're really passionate about something, you will find a way to make something happen, a little bit happen.
And I think it also depends on how the stress level of your daytime work is. I mean, if you're not really in a stressy position, which I'm sure is very likely in medical jobs, if you're not in such a rough spot, it could work out anyways.
Yeah, we'll have to see. It's kind of a bizarre, weird, confusing system on how you actually figure out what kind of doctor you're going to be. I'm hoping for one that allows me to do stuff like this.
Another question that I find interesting, I mean, you're doing this based on the Unity engine, which by itself is not open source. So what I see here is licensed, so to say. I don't know about the details about licensing, but under what license could the product actually be? I mean, it obviously can't be an entire open source project. So how do you intend to...
Well, it says open sources. I'm sorry. I was going to say that you can modify and customize it as much as you want, and the amount of control you have is way more than you can have with the Armada engine. I don't know. You can even go into the things a lot of the functions that they have and say, no, I want to make it my way. So I don't necessarily foresee that being the lack of open source being a problem. There's another part of your question. Oh yeah, the licensing. So the Unity licensing is based off of how much money you're making with the game, and so I'm not going to be selling this game. So if I make under 100,000, then I can use all the features. The only difference between the licenses of Unity is that you get it doesn't say made with Unity at the beginning when you launch the game, and you can have an editor that's slightly darker. That's it.
So basically, as long as you're not trying to professionalize this, it's free to do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, as long as I'm not making money with it, I'm not going to have.
Yeah.
Even if I made 100,000 a year with this game, first of all, CBS would be suing me. But say they didn't, asking like paying Unity a little bit for the license at that point would be like nothing compared to when I was the situation I was in if I made over 100,000 with this, which
I can only guess which would be a real issue if you actually were being endorsed by Paramount, which I'm not sure is likely.
So yeah, I would just have them pay for it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this would give it a completely new direction,
Yeah,
but it would be still a nice development, quite literally.
absolutely. But yeah, I don't know if I ever answered the question about races. I was going to go a little bit more into that if that was cool.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
The core races, the Romulans, Klingons, Borg, Federation, Dominion. Let's see, that's 5. The last one. Cardassians. Can't forget the Cardassians. So basically what you had in Fleet Ops plus the Cardassians. But I'm also trying to, like with Unity, it's very easy to make something more modular. So I'm trying to kind of design it in a way so that way it's easy to make a new race and customize them. Come up with the parameters in my brain that in combination you can make a unique race that's diverse and different, but balanced.
Yeah.
And that was my favorite part of Fleet Ops is that they actually like played Armada 2. It's like every race had just a different skin for the same building or the same ship. And so I wanted it to be really easy for me to expand and create races. I wanted to kind of go into maybe some Tholians,
Yeah. That's what's actually so cool about Star Trek. You have tons of races. You can do whatever you want, basically.
Absolutely.
So from an artwork point of view, this is so rich and so diverse and has so many opportunities. It's just a question of getting it in a technical form that is easily being used or usable.
Absolutely. And that was going to be my way to get my art fix, is make some new races. All the assets have already been made by the Armada 3 folks, and so, if I wanted to sink my teeth into some asset creation, make some new races. Another interesting thought that I had, game mechanic wise, that I would really like to implement. I always thought it'd be cool to have era progression.
There is already a Star Trek Armada 2 mod out there who is basically doing that. He finished already the Enterprise era, the TOS, and I think also the movie era.
Oh wow, that would be cool.
Maybe you can have some inspiration there.
Yeah, I need to check that out then. My idea was to sort of have like the game, like you could have when you played Armada, you could actually speed up the build times of things and how fast the game played, everything happens. I was thinking it'd be kind of cool to have one where you could have like era progression rates or something like that. So that way, if you really wanted to, you could pick an era to, a point on the Star Trek timeline to start in, a rate that you're going through that timeline, and the various ships kind of become sort of activated. It's like a second level of tech tree, where you have to meet this time period criteria first for this one unit to become available. And that the stations themselves would automatically like rebuild and skin themselves, the current era. That was just my idea for that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. What also always struck me as a little bit dull was the stock vanilla Armada 1 and 2 resource model. In Fleet Ops, they altered it quite considerably in comparison, but I think this still isn't the end of it. There could be much more things doable and more variety, especially when it comes to that. If you say you want to diverse the races, maybe also the economy could be vastly different. I mean,
let me tell you about the Borg when you're done.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I was getting at. If you look
Oh
at
yeah,
Fleet of Spork, they play completely different to the other races, and I find it important that the game is diverse in this respect.
absolutely. While we're on the subject of constructors and stuff, one thing that one of my devs has like absolutely made me say that I'm going to implement is Supreme Commander sort of mechanism where you could actually bring multiple constructors in to speed up a
Yeah,
project.
yeah, exactly. This is what I was also having in the back of my head. Some way of doing the economy in a fashion that you want to do it. Doing more construction buildings parallel or enhancing one construction. I mean, the research part, for example, always was just about the ships, actually. More powerful
Yeah.
weapons, faster propulsion, stuff like that. But the economy is not really
Oh yeah.
moved in any fashion. There's nothing done.
Yeah, the economy, it would be kind of interesting. I would like, I don't want it as complex as say Star Trek Online, but I do think that it would be good to kind of have like two or three resources all races have, and then each race kind of can have their own specific resource that kind of completely shifts their goals, you know? Like, I don't know, like the Federation could have something like morale. You know, there could be like a sort of morale resource for some species where if you were the aggressor in a conflict, you know, maybe you kind of that would be costly to you, you know, you wouldn't really have as much support or something. And then Klingons, you know, they would wanting to fight constantly, you know, so that would keep them happy, you know.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think this was done in Birth of the Federation.
Yeah, similar system, that's true.
So where you have certain traits of a race which influence them. For example, Klingons may be very war-driven, but maybe their research takes a lot of more time. So having some advantage. I mean, this is actually what they did in Armada 1. You have, for example, the Borg, which are really powerful in offense. You have the Romulans, which actually are very good at cloaking and having nice special abilities, where you have the Klingons, which are simply raw force and, for example, very cheap in comparison.
you know who's really fun to play as in Fleet Ops when well who should be really fun to play. Sometimes in game their ships suck, but the Romulans.
Yeah,
Like you
exactly.
could just be like, you know, absolute cheeky.
If you
uh,
could actually really be playing sneaky, really
yeah,
sneaky, not the fleet ops way where you can cloak your ships and being discovered anyways.
someone showed me like a preview for what the Fleet Ops devs had worked on before the limitations of the engine just really wanted to make them rage quit. And the Romulans could actually like build. You could actually they could build ships, cloak the ship production, so they could
Yeah,
build some in secret. Gosh, yeah. Okay, so you guys probably wanted to know a little bit about some of the features I had wanted to do, and there's so many cool ideas I had.
oh yeah.
Let me see. Okay, one of them's kind of important, like a social one. I wanted there to be like taunts that you could do. You know, like if you wanted to spend your resources and kind of be a little, you know, if you really felt like you were at an advantage, you could kind of waste resources maybe on like taunts. This would be very like limited because I don't want people to absolutely abuse this. You know, it costs like, you know, you could spend a ridiculous amount of resources, there'd be a cooldown for it, but it'd be really cool if you're the Borg to just like freak, you know, just shake the morale or psychologically damage the other player. Right? It was with the "We Are the Borg," you know, broadcast.
Yeah,
Um,
or the Romulans with the tendency to destabilize.
yeah, you know, I kind of wanted some fun, like you know, social things like that that you could spend resources on in the game.
Yeah.
And then the Borg. This is my idea for the Borg. You can call me crazy if you want. If you've seen, I don't know, Enterprise gets a lot of hate, but it did introduce a kind of interesting idea. I was listening to the commentary of the episode Regeneration, and their whole thought was is that I don't know if you remember the episode, but this Arctic transport is stolen from
Yeah.
Earth. And they're constantly like coming across other aliens and assimilating those ships and adding it. And it's sort of like the blob. It's like this blob that's like a trash compactor that's slowly building up towards a cube. And so I just kind of wanted to kind of have each Borg ship be like really unique in that fact. It would like you could assimilate other ships, and that would be worked into the design of your Borg ship.
In a light fashion, you already have this in Fleet Ops, where you can kind of configure your ships. And
Yeah.
I believe the mechanics itself is sound, but what the game actually lacks is a visual representation of it. So, of course,
Yeah.
you can tell if it is a tactical cube or not a tactical cube, but does it have more beams? Does it have more torpedoes? You cannot say unless it's firing. And being able to influence the optical properties of a unit, a ship, that would be cool to represent what you're doing there.
See, here's what I was thinking. You would start with like you could build probes or maybe scout cubes, and then it's going to be very assimilation heavy, the mechanics, where you actually need to capture ships, and you can sort of have them sort of like fuse, like sort of like the fusion cube thing, but you can kind of have the ship fuse into that, and you kind of like tell it what shape you're going for, and slowly it's going to start working toward that shape. Like a sphere, and then a pyramid, a diamond, or a cube. And you have this picture of my Borg cube that's on the stream here that sometimes comes across. That actually is a fully procedural generated Borg texture, and so every cube is going to be different, and so you can add all these parameters and things. And so if you had one that was more like a tactical cube, you could kind of slowly, like sort of like a gradient. Not like, I can only explain this in art terms, but you could slowly get it to, as a ship became had more of one feature, as a Borg ship had more of one feature, you could actually have that reflect in the texture. And as you customize your Borg ship, you could it would visually indicate to the other players what kind of capabilities that have.
And maybe another aspect, if you remember the Voyager episode where you are at the Uni complex, there are scenes where you can see that ships are actually being integrated into those structures.
Oh, really?
Or at least you see spheres. I'm not sure if they are going in or outside of the building, but something similar like that, where you say, well, let's break off a chunk of our building and make it into a ship, or the other way around.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that would be great too. I just kind of want, every time you play the Borg, what's gonna...
You don't know what is coming.
Yeah.
It's actually a feature of them. They are versatile. They can adapt.
Yeah, and that way they kind of sort of scale to what the current level of the other player is. If all your ships are small, their ships are probably going to be small, because they kind of have to rely on their encounters with you to adapt to that and create better technology.
I mean, you could also factor in the time itself. As you said, some sort of era progression could also be not with era, but in their case, because Borg don't really have eras in the way like TOS or TNG. But this could also be reflected into this, that you say, well, you can't just build a huge honkin' tactical cube right from the start, but later on you can. In Fleet Ops, I believe they have solved this just with resources. In the beginning, you simply don't have the resources to build one, but actually from a technical point of view, you are quite capable of doing so, because you have it available right from the start. You simply lack resources. And what actually they did in the game, at least in my opinion, is they made the Borg into someone who comes later and in lesser numbers, but when they come, they're gonna kick your butt with one unit, which is pretty Borgy, so to say.
Yeah.
And this could go along really well with your idea, that you say, well, in the beginning you can only create smaller ships, but you can decide either you build new, bigger ones after a while, or you improve your existing ones.
You guys play Fleet Ops, right?
Sure.
Yeah. This reminds me, they're actually, I got all my roommates when I was in undergraduate school into Fleet Ops. And one of my engineer roommates comes up to me and he says, I think I figured out how to get a Borg cube in Fleet Ops, a tactical cube, to the enemy's base within 7 minutes of the game. And we tried it and it actually works. And so it is possible to get a cube there. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The Borg are someone who are meant to control a lot less units, but to compensate for that, I want you to be able to have a lot of customizing options, so that way you aren't just bored just with your two ships. I want there to be things for the Borg player to do, like maybe some mini games. Maybe they actually have to do a lot of micromanaging to get things assimilated right.
This is something I believe they explored in Armada 2, but not to the full extent that you can assimilate technologies.
Yeah.
Imagine the Borg being able to cloak a cube.
Oh gosh. Oh boy,
I mean, it should obviously scale with the importance of the technology. So, let's say cloak can be done, but really needs a lot of time. But once you have it, oh my god, you're getting your ass whooped, you know?
I wanted to go in that direction. This is one aspect we never saw in the Armada games really, that you take the enemy ships into your base and deconstruct their technology, reverse engineer everything and integrate different aspects like cloak, the metaphasic cloak for example from Next Generation would be a nice idea for a Borg cube.
Or the healing abilities of the Federation, you know, the engineering team or the Gemini effect. I mean, this could make them really, really evil opponents. But then again, in order to get there, you would, of course, need to have some sort of penalty, like it takes a lot of time to research that stuff. But you could make it available.
Or you could give like a Borg twist to it. Like, I don't know if the Borg would need to cloak their ships, but maybe they could use that technology to cloak, like, I want transwarp gates to make their way back. And so maybe you could cloak like your transwarp gate, or, you know, like there's ways you could balance that. A phase cloaking Borg cube would be an absolute nightmare, but maybe that's what you want to go for at that point. Like if you've let that happen, shame on you. Like,
I guess we all know those hateful maps with the asteroid fields, and sometimes you can't cross it because the movement of the asteroids are so stupid.
yeah.
Bypassing that with a phased cube. Holy cow.
Oh goodness.
But you're right. You could, as you said, you could give it some sort of Borg twist. Let's say you assimilate a certain unit and you don't necessarily get this specific technology, but maybe, for example, if you assimilate a Romulan ship with a cloak, then you don't need to invest any kind of resources for decloaking. All Borg ships can simply see those cloaked ships because they know how the cloak works now and they can see him right away. Things like that, where you say it's not the same as having the cloak, but it gives him some sort of ability that is Borg unique.
Absolutely, yeah.
Also, that way you could move the Borg up in the different eras. For example, if there is a trading between all the races, it's mandatory basically in the game. The Borg could assimilate sometimes the traders, and with that information they, well, progress in the era system.
Yeah, maybe. I did want to bring trading back, actually. And I was thinking that rather than instantly transfer resources like you can in at least fleet ops, I think the default setting would be that you would actually need to gather the resources on the ship and go to their trade station and give it to them. But, you know, I also want the player to be able to customize the settings. Like, you know, there's the recommended settings. But, you know, if they don't like a feature, I want it to be very easy for them to turn it off. And like, so that way, if they want Armada 1, you know, they can have Armada 1.
Yeah, this is also something that I find very interesting in many games that give you the ability to really control how your match is going to be played. If you look at Rise of Nations, for example, you have tons of settings, what to do in the game and what not. And this really spices up the game, I believe.
At the same time, things should be made, you know, like things should still be as simple as possible. If you want to just like turn on all these advanced fun features, I kind of want them there for that. But I kind of want the game to kind of like, you know, out of the package to be something that's like, you know, the players are able to pick up and grasp and understand. If there's all these mechanics and features that are, you know, really complicated right off the bat, that might be way too hard for them.
Yeah, something easy to play, hard to master.
Yeah. Another idea I had for the Borg was I want them to be like legit bad guys. So they would be a race that you could play if you wanted to do a 1 versus 2, and you would still be up for like a real challenging time if you were the 2 players.
It would actually be an interesting mod, so to say, or a mode that you say. It's not a classic symmetry game. Both sides have the same resources, but one side is somehow favored, like the Borg, and maybe they get double the resources or double the income or something like that, and you play 4 versus 1.
Yeah, because if you, I don't know, like if you've played Fleet Ops a bit, sometimes you're just like, there's not enough people here for a 2v2. We just have 3. Oh my gosh, I don't want to play a free-for-all. Let's do a 2v1.
We all know that this isn't exactly a fun match. 2 versus 1 is one of the worst outcomes. I mean, 3 versus 2 may work, but 2 versus 1 depends really on the skills of each player.
Yeah, I've had some fun ones where I was the 2 and then another one where I was the 1. But I think it would be a lot more fun if the game could actually like sort of give like a handicap to the 1 player, in those situations. Way it's actually a fair match.
Especially if that component would be random.
Oh, hey, that's a good idea. I don't know. I'm someone who always likes to cause chaos in these games. Like, I have no idea what I'm gonna do. I don't have no idea if what my plan is gonna work, but at least I'm gonna surprise the other player.
I would also like to talk a little bit, since we have the Star Trek September and the 55th anniversary of Star Trek. What was your first contact with the franchise?
Well, I'd have to be my dad. Both my parents like Star Trek, but my dad was really into it. He wasn't someone that I got to. He was very busy. He worked graveyards. He was a ER veterinarian, and I didn't really get to spend very much time with him. But I do remember bonding with him, like as a toddler, like 3 or 4. People say you can't remember that young, but I have vague like memories of just seeing Voyager with him. I just remember this moments, like one of my very first memories was seeing like Voyager go to warp at the end of the credits after it kind of flew, over that ice planet and through all that kind of like those god rays, from the star planet. And I don't know, I just remember like as a kid realizing that this was outer space and how cool that was. And it's just been sort of something that, like, I don't know, my family, like, not everybody got along or agreed on very much, but everyone that I knew liked Star Trek, and it was something that would bring us together, and we could all kind of watch together. I remember even my grandmother liked Star Trek.
Oh, that's rare.
Yeah. And so, like, she really did not like Star Wars because it was way too flashy and too much special effects. But she really liked Star Trek because and really approved of it because it was something that always like had she would say there was always like some sort of ethical situation or moral to the story, and she thought that was absolutely great for people of all ages, and especially for someone young who's like rather than watching like little kid shows where there's like a a cheesy moral to it. Star Trek did that too, but in a little bit more clever way, nuanced way. And so, yeah, that was something that my grandmother and I also like to do. So it's just sort of something that all the people that I grew up with absolutely love, and probably why it's so important to me today. And I've never quote unquote outgrown it. I'm still obsessed with it.
You of course played all the Armada games, but what other Star Trek games did you play?
Let's see. When I was in grade school, my mother bought me the pack. It was like the Star Trek Action Pack that had, of course, the Armadas, but it also had the Elite Forces. And so I absolutely loved Elite Force 1. I was terrified of the Borg, so I could never like actually play the real single player for the longest time. I would just go on like the virtual Voyager thing. And then another game that I think is really like a dark horse or underrated that I think my dad had a copy of. My dad, it's weird, he doesn't play video games, but for some reason he bought this one back in the day. And I'm so glad that it was re-released. Star Trek Away Team. I absolutely loved that game. I've probably played my fair share of Star Trek Online, but it's not something that I enjoy. It feels like work to me. I absolutely love a lot of the ideas and art in there, but just like the mechanics wise, I'm not someone who likes to play mostly against the computer. I like to be competitive and play with other players.
Yeah, Star Trek Online is more a single player experience than a real multiplayer experience.
Yeah, I like to be able to win sometimes, and you can't really, even back when PvP was more of a thing in Star Trek Online. You can't. But that doesn't mean that I haven't enjoyed a lot of some of the storyline things that they came up with.
Well, you can play Dabo as PvP.
Oh, that has PvP? Sure.
Yeah, it's against the other players, so yeah.
Yeah,
I'd much rather like to play Tongo.
All right. I'm sold. Let's go play Dabo. I could never figure out Dabo on Star Trek Online. I'm just like, it's just basically like I don't know. I went to Vegas last summer and I couldn't really figure out what. Like you just pick random symbols and hopefully you get lucky. It doesn't really feel like you have very much consequence though. As I said, I really enjoy stuff that like is balanced player versus player. So like Elite Force, I love playing with my best friend and I wasn't into Star Trek but really got into Elite Force. We played this one Fleet Ops player who was one of the first times playing kind of Elite Force multiplayer, and I just remember this really funny encounter my friend and I had. We were in the same room. We did a 2 versus 1. It was versus my friend in Europe, and he could blow us up with a photon weapon from miles away. And so I don't know. So even like it's not necessarily all about winning, but if there's something that absolutely hilarious and ridiculous happens in a multiplayer game, I enjoy that. So
Yeah, I can relate to that. The many experience I had in Battlefield, it's priceless.
yeah. Like what was great about Fleet Ops is that you can observe some games, and I once observed a 7-player free for all that lasted 17 hours. I remember I was in junior high. I watched this on my laptop. Players do this crazy free for all in Fleet Ops, and it lasted, as I said, 17 hours. And you never like one moment you thought one player was going to win, and then they lost the upper hand. And so just video games where it's like skill actually really means something, and a little bit of luck comes into play, but one where the lead is going to go back and forth, and you're going to constantly have to be fighting neck and neck, and not where it's a foregone conclusion really early.
I really couldn't see something like that. I prefer much more the pay-to-win route where you pay $800 and you're the best, and the other players are not. It's much more better, I think.
Yeah.
I think you're trying to get. You're going for the what is it? The notorious. You're trying to get a lot of activity for your channel with the hate in the comments at this point.
Well, it is a new route for me.
Maybe he tries to attract EA fanboys.
Just piss off everyone, and then you'll get a lot of activity. It's not a bad strategy.
Well, it works for EA.
Negative publicity still is publicity.
On that note, I've decided to make all of my game in the Discovery universe, and we're gonna have the Discovery just kind of pop in with the Spore Drive here and there to taunt you. Also, that one Admiral from Picard, she's gonna anytime if you choose her as the avatar, she's just gonna tell you to F off.
And if you want to combat that, you can join his team and influence the development of the game.
Beautiful. They'll know I need help after that. I actually did have some joke ideas for the game, because I have a whole channel full of them. Let me find that. Joke troll ideas. Here we go. Q comes in and starts flinging your ships around. At some point, the Enterprise J, there's warp-ins. Maybe there's a low chance of a massive Enterprise J taking up the half of the map just warps in.
Maybe a more serious question at this point. Something I was thinking about. How do you want to approach the 3D aspect? I mean, in Armada 1, it was barely noticeable. And in Armada 2, they tried to somehow craft it onto the game, but it never really was 3D. How do you want to approach that?
I don't know. I really think that most of the gameplay comes out of the 2D element of it, which is, I know it's space. You should have 3 dimensions. You shouldn't be like Khan, who can only think in 2. So I would like it to sort of be like 2.5D, if that makes sense. There's a game that was for the PlayStation called Star Trek Encounters that I forgot to mention that I played a little bit of. I like the idea where there were 3 different levels that you could control with that. There was the one you started on, you could go up 1, you could go down 1. And so I was thinking it would be kind of interesting for, I don't want people to get a constructor, have it go all the way up, Z space or Y space up as max as you can, and just build a turret over the enemy starbase. That doesn't, or they're mining. That doesn't make sense to me. But I would like you to have those 3 layers, sort of like Star Trek Encounters, where if you press say, I'm just throwing out keys, but say if you press Control and left click, your unit will go up a plane. And if you press Alt, then it will go to the down plane. So that way, it's still 2D, but there's 3 sort of layers to it. That's sort of what I've been leaning towards.
And what would be the effect? You have the range of the weapons being influenced by that, so that you can, let's say, not fire from level 2 to 3, or what would be the game mechanics effect?
Well, this idea really made sense to me after when I first implemented weapon systems for the prototype. I had it so that way I was like, well, you know what? The photon torpedo banks on top of a Miranda should not be able to shoot below the plane of the ship, the
Yeah,
soft.
yeah.
So, if you have a unit with most of the torpedoes on the top like that, I think that might be a good one to move to the bottom plane. And then, say you want to move Voyager to the top plane because its torpedoes are underneath the saucer.
Yeah, it
I
would
think,
greatly influence the gameplay. Imagine two times the same kind of unit. Both have their torpedo launchers on top. You will definitely not want to go up one level.
oh, and also, I think it would be a great idea when one of the ships blows up. Like, if you've seen The Last Jedi, I think the ship should just start falling, like gravity should turn on.
Ooh, that would be nice, yeah.
Okay, that was the sarcasm.
No, I like it. I like the idea that it falls down to if you're in orbit on a planet, for example, or in a black hole area.
You're absolutely right. I actually had that idea. Yeah, if you're in like if you're in a gravity plane,
Yeah, in the gravity well, yeah.
as soon as the ship loses engines, I want actual like real physics to come into play of like celestial bodies around it. Speaking of black holes, I definitely want black holes to be in this game. And one idea I had was I don't know, like if you're familiar with the movie, what's the movie with Matthew McConaughey, Interstellar?
Yeah, sure.
I got a pitch of the story, but I never saw it.
Oh, okay. It's a movie that really plays with the idea of relativity and how that can affect drama, and absolutely made a gorgeous looking black hole. I want that black hole in the game, like as close as we can match it. But I think it would be really cool for black holes if you're like in the vicinity of a black hole. I think that should slow down your build times because time moves a lot faster relative to the rest of space. You're around more matter.
That would be ingenious.
It would like slow down the build times if you were building somewhere near a black hole.
This is a penalty for the guy who builds the station there, and maybe the other way around, you may not be able to approach that part of space with bigger ships because they are simply too heavy. They would be pulled in, so you cannot reach that. Might be an interesting decision then, so that you can, for example, attack such a shipyard only with small ships.
Yeah, and this is stuff that if you were trying to mod in the Armada engine, you would have to like go to every single script file for every single ship and change it, every time you wanted to implement something like this. But with Unity, you can just you can make a script, you could throw it on there, you could apply this logic, and it's a lot easier to change things and play around. So there's all these really cool ideas that I've come up with over I just kind of want to throw in there and see if this can be balanced. How would this work? Would this be cool? It's sort of like all these dream ideas you've had as a kid playing Armada, and I'm always looking for ideas from other people. At this point, I'm just I'm here to listen to everyone's ideas and just collect them all, and then later we'll go through them all and see what we think would be interesting, what could work.
Well, I can add one more. We talked about the black holes. If you remember that Voyager episode where they first got back in contact with Earth, the Hirogen network.
Oh, yeah.
They disabled the station's gravity generator. It's not exactly that, but I say gravity generator. And it was sucked into the black hole.
Oh.
So as a player, you have to, for example, research a certain technology that your station can be built around the black hole, and the other player can disable that generator.
I tell you what, I think this would come into play a lot with Romulan stations. I was going to have there be I had a small chance of a singularity or black hole forming if a Romulan station was destroyed. And this would be something, of course, that the player would be able to be like, I don't want that to ever happen. So I'll just, the host of the game, I'm just going to uncheck that box.
Also, something that I believe is a little bit lacking in Armada is the importance of a certain section of the map. I mean, you have the resource spots, which are obviously important. But if you look, for example, at the game mechanics of Company of Heroes, it isn't sufficient just to have a region. You need a connection to it, for example. Same goes for Ashes of the Singularity, where you can, of course, have a region somewhere on the other side of the map, but as long as it doesn't have any connection to your realm, so to say, it doesn't give you anything.
So you're saying that you don't want players to be able to go behind an enemy base and build a shipyard and just start repairing and just keep having a front there?
Well,
So
maybe yes, but maybe it should have some sort of penalty. My point is, the position on a map is rather arbitrary in Armada 1 and 2. It actually does not matter if you place your yard near your stations or somewhere else. It really doesn't matter.
I see. Yeah, that's a good idea. So maybe the more proximity you are to, like, if you're within a certain range of a starbase, your shipyards run more optimally. Something like that.
Yeah.
This just reminded me
Or
of
maybe if your resource gathering is a little bit closer, then the efficiency is a little bit higher or something like that.
Okay.
Another cool feature from Company of Heroes would be the general system. In Company of Heroes 1, you have 3 different generals per faction. And for example, Germany has this great ability to retreat all the infantry. And it's a slogan like, the entire German army stands before you, and they run away, they run home. You could make something like that for the Borg, for example. We are the Borg, and the demoralized ships just turn around and fly to their base.
Yeah, I actually was thinking for the Borg, since they're such valuable units, you might want to be able to build a transwarp gate, and that's how you could save your units, you know, if you really need to pull them back. This whole idea of sort of having some sort of connection, you know, between your bases, like you aren't just kind of starting off very far on the map, that there'd be a penalty. It reminds me of Species 8472, my ideas for them. They're also a race, kind of like the Borg, that are massively, almost overpowered. Still balanced, but a race that is, you know, that you're going to want to, like, you know, like the host of the game might not allow, say, players to beat Borg or 8472 if there's no way that they can come across a balanced agreement. But 8472, I was thinking you would need like fluidic space sort of stations to like you're like expanding fluidic space, and if your ships stayed too long out of fluidic space, they would start to get damaged, and that's where you could
like the Zerg creep.
Like what?
Have you played StarCraft?
Oh, I tried, but I never could find the serial code on my CD as a kid.
Well, StarCraft 2 is free to play. First hint. And second hint is they have this game mechanics of the Zerg, which can only build their buildings on creep. And creep is spread by some sort of unit. Depends on StarCraft 1 or 2. And as long as you haven't spread out creep, you can't build there. Or the other way around, if you have built a building there and the creep for some reason is being retracted, for example, the creep spreader is destroyed, then after a while they begin to be bleeding out and dying slowly. And very much the same mechanics.
Yeah, I was thinking that the that 8472, you know, like there'd be like a fish out of water as soon as they would leave fluidic space or fluidic realm. And I don't know, I thought could be a cool mechanic for, you know, they would be sort of like turret building with these stations outward, trying to like encompass, sort of like growing like you know, like a blob or an amoeba, like just kind of just taking over things slowly. And they'd be very tough to fight within fluidic space. They'd be very tough to fight normally, but the more time that you could lure them out of fluidic space, the more vulnerable they'd become, and that's where gameplay would kind of go around when fighting them.
It reminds me of the mechanics of Ashes of the Singularity, where one faction has this property that if they are inside their own regions, they heal a lot faster than outside of in the enemy territory.
I see.
So you can, of course, attack anyone, and you're not bleeding out slowly or something like that. But if you really want to heal fast, then you go home. Maybe on the other side, you cannot do what other factions can do, like repairing your ships in a shipyard. So
exactly,
they're biological units, so they always repair on their own speed. You can speed this up, except, of course, if you're inside your own realm.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that I like any sort of like unique race gameplay like that. I love, and I really want to play with. The Cardassians were someone that I actually had an interesting idea for them, and this would be kind of more relevant for player versus player. You know, you of course are going to have a mini map. I want it to be so that way if you press like M, like in Star Trek Online, you can get like a big window of your mini map with a little bit more details, and maybe you can control things through there for, you know, like a more strategic view. But I was thinking for the Cardassians, some of their ships could have some sort of like, especially with the Obsidian Order, would have some sort of like masking technology, or it's like an energy signature technology, where that way they don't show up as a blip on your radar, your mini map. But if you're looking right there, your ships aren't going to automatically fire on them if they move past you. So if you aren't paying attention, that's how their stealth works. But if you see them with your eyes, you can
You can still click at them and attack them, but your units won't do it on themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. So I thought that would be a really fun mechanic to play along. It would keep players paranoid, like them.
What I also found always very interesting is this aspect of fleet ops where you can kind of select your trade. For example, you can choose for the Borg if you want to use the optimize or the assimilation trade.
Avatars, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking some sort of avatar system or some sort of like directive for the Federation. I wanted there to be like a mirror universe avatar. So if someone picked Federation, they weren't necessarily going to be like the nice, happy folks. You might get like a mirror universe version where all the ships have those nice yellow painted textures and they like are very combat focused and sort of very, maybe somewhat Klingon like. And, I kind of wanted some variation like that too.
Yeah, or you can pick, so to say, the mode. Like during wartime, let's say Dominion War, they are more powerful when it comes to weapons and shields, but maybe the research is lower. Or if you look at the Romulans, you can have a heads-on mode where they are really powerful with weapons, and you can have the stealth situation where they try not to be visible, but it's kind of exclusive,
Yeah. You guys asked me about campaign mode, and I definitely wanted there to be like campaigns that players can play eventually. That's not like top of the list, but one thing that I wanted to do was a multiplayer campaign mode, sort of like it would be kind of cool to reenact the Dominion War, so like you might play on like for a tournament, say you have like players who decide what race they're going to be and you kind of just reenact the whole Dominion War, and that's like a tournament that you guys have.
It's funny because I had this very similar idea. I believe it was Bridge Commander. That you have scenarios. In Bridge Commander, you command ships. And one thing that you could expand, the idea is that you have multiple players with multiple ships. And for example, reenacting the Battle of Shintoka. In essence, you could do a very similar thing in Armada, of course, a scenario where one side has certain properties and units or stations at their disposal, and the other side as well. And it's not clear who's winning, but the scenario is, for example, taken from the shows.
I want a very versatile map editor for players because that's one of my favorite things about Armada and Fleet Ops is that you can make maps and stuff. And so I want to give players like a little bit of a better tool, like like a brush where they can kind of be in like they could kind of see the whole map in front of them, and they could just kind of like add nebula and add things to their heart's content really easily. But one thing that I was hoping to be able to program to have available to map editors or some sort of like setup like you're talking about where they could create a scenario on the map for the players.
So kind of a scripting or property setting for a specific map. It's not just elements on the map and you can play with the usual mechanics, but you have something on top.
Absolutely, yeah. There's all sorts of things that would be so cool to one day do. There is the core to this game, but then there's features like this that like expanding a map editor for scenarios that I'm trying to make things as solid, make a good foundation for right now, so that way it's easy to implement all these cool ideas, because Unity is a tool where you can do almost anything you want if you have the time.
Yeah, and I believe creating tools or having tools at your disposal that reduce the creation of new content to the artwork and not the technical aspects that much, that's really important. I also work in a company where certain types of work are actually not very demanding on your cognitive abilities, but you will have to get them into the system. It's not like it's difficult to do, but it is something that takes time. And if you can cut down on the tedious and the difficult part and let people focus more on their ideas, if you can get this going, then you're really, really going nice.
Yeah. And it's something that you can easily learn to do. Anyone can, I think. And so I want to create a good framework for other people who want to be involved in this project to add features like that we can turn on and off. I think if this were something that if we got a good playable version sometime soon and we got people really interested in this project and wanting to contribute, this project would really take off in a way that you'd have players that could kind of come in and be devs. and really with their one really big cool idea that they want to implement, and that we could try, and it could just sort of be something that grows and grows from there.
Sounds not only like the uniquest and best version of a Star Trek game, but also the best version of a community. And Star Trek showed in the past many times that those communities, those fans are so creative and so passionate about the Star Trek games and the franchise in general that they make the impossible possible. So this community could do it.
Absolutely. And the Fleet Ops community is full of people who are, it's a really good community. And it's just something that I really want to keep alive and keep, paying forward, because I wouldn't even see this as like the start of a community. I would see this as the continuation of the Fleet Ops community. And I kind of want to keep that alive and thriving for many more years.
Yeah, we can only hope that the GOG releases now bringing fresh blood to the franchise and the communities.
That's right. They're working on was it GOG? Is that the name of the company? They're working on or the website. They're working on Armada right now.
And I'm so curious how the result will be, because I know from my own experience that sometimes they mess around with those games, like pulling out the network multiplayer or stuff like that. And quite frankly, an Armada without a multiplayer wouldn't be something I would buy, actually. So I'm really curious what they are about to do with the content.
You're absolutely right. But, I actually did find a way to get Armada 1 and 2 working on Windows 10.
Me too. This is what I'm getting at, because why would I buy Armada 1 or 2 remade or the re-released if the resulting product actually is having less features than what I already got? Makes no sense.
Yeah, with Armada, you want people to play multiplayer because you want to bring new blood, new players in, and so
even if you are just playing humans versus air or something like that, it's already better than redoing the campaign for the upteen's time.
Yeah, those games relied on like GameSpy Arcade or something like that is what I think it was called.
Yeah.
And I can totally see them being like, well, that's no longer a thing. I don't know. What do you think, guys? Let's rip out multiplayer. So yeah, I'm kind of worried.
While we're talking at this subject, I already told you what I think about the network capabilities. The GameSpy network or the VON network for Armada is pretty much the same. What's so important about those is what they teach us if the network is going down. Once you are unable to play the game easily or properly in multiplayer, once this network is down, this is a bad situation. So if there's one thing I can give you as an advice or as a wish, make it in a way that makes it standalone. So you don't need any third party, third computer, server, whatever to get a multiplayer game via internet flying.
Yeah, I want it to be like one server that CBS, say I've released the game, it has lots of people, and it actually is something that's big enough that gets on CBS's radar.
Yeah.
And then they're like, hey, sorry, you can't release that game anymore. You take it down off the internet and shut down your server. Well, if that happens, I want to be in a situation, maybe this should be cut out and this is terrible for me to say, but I want to be in a situation where it's like too late for them. Like, I can stop, but the damage is already done. The players
exactly. I believe there are also precedents, like was it Battlefield 2, where the rights owner shut down the servers?
Yeah, it was Battlefield 2, where they were so popular that EA said, okay, now you have to close, you are more popular than our new games.
And this is really a shit show. If a company can control you in this fashion, I really find this unfair to everybody who bought the game, actually.
Yeah. But that's why I'm just going to be like, hey, you need a copy of Armada and Armada 1, like installed in order to play it. So that way it's like, this can be maybe construed as a mod, That way I'm still like, I don't know, I'm hoping that that's enough. That would seem to be enough for Fleet Ops, but that was back when Star Trek was dead and they didn't really care about Star Trek. But now they're like, oh, hey, we can, let's try and make some money from this franchise now.
Since we are going much longer than I expected, I would say let's go for the last question on my list. Let's talk a little bit what you would like from an official Star Trek game. What are your wishes? Would you like a special era of Star Trek, a special gameplay?
So if CBS or Paramount were to make a video game, what would I want them to do?
Exactly.
Okay. Let's see here. Well, I guess I can make this game. So, uh, we'll go with something different from sort of this is what I'm creating with Armada 4 is my dream Star Trek game. But if I were to like maybe expand that further and have the resources of a company, what sort of or maybe another game that I would like available besides Armada 4, I would probably want something where I like the idea of Star Trek Bridge Crew, but I feel like it was way too Kelvin-y. It was cool that they added like the Enterprise D, but I would probably like something where I could just like go be in the Star Trek world in VR. Like I don't have a VR headset, but I know someday we will. I would like a VR game where you could just like maybe role play or control a ship and be like a member of a bridge, like or be a member of the crew, just like working in like the next generation era and just kind of like be like, you know, exploring and doing all the things you would in Star Trek. I don't know. I think it'd be really cool. Like if Star Trek Adventures did a VR game, the role playing game.
Yeah, definitely. I would buy that instantly. Even the VR headset.
Yeah, I would buy a VR headset too. uh, the Stage 9, they actually had recreated the entire ship, and you can do it in VR. I think that they should like hire the Stage 9 crew, kind of like the Orville has done, and just make like the best, most epic role playing game you can with a VR headset. That's what I would want CBS to do.
Hope they hear it.
Yeah, let's hope they learned from their mistakes.
Well, they were poached by the Orville, like they were shut down, and then the Orville people were like, "Oh, hey, CBS is being mean to you. Well, you know what? Let's let you make a really good game for our franchise."
Yeah, it was so nice seeing on Twitter the comments. Basically, exact reverse from CBS.
I did not get to see that or enjoy that, but so people were kind of like writing a lot of salty, hilarious things.
The really sad part about this actually is that so many people say, well, the Orwell today is what Star Trek should be. And this doesn't only cover the stories or the shows. It also seems to cover how they go about fan base and fan projects.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really feel like the Orville has been sort of a spiritual successor. They got all the old crew from those shows. They kind of have this much better attitude. But I don't know. I've been wrong many times, but I still think that CBS, Paramount, whatever. I hope that they're learning some lessons and growing, and I just hope that there's still hope. And I didn't have any hope at all until Lower Decks came out. Lower Decks came out. I'm like, okay, I think that we can get some good new Star Trek still.
I mean, it's perfectly possible. The real question is, why didn't they do it in the first place?
I don't know. Like, I think that they want to be edgy. They want to be other shows besides Star Trek. They want to be Game of Thrones, or they want to be like The Wire or Breaking Bad. And I don't think that the people that they've hired, I mean, that's an interesting idea. And part of me does want to see what an edgy Star Trek show would look like. But I feel like that's, like if your first show back is going to be that's not what it should be. I think it should be like comfort food, like you're supposed to make money off of the fans. You want the fans to pay for your streaming application, and you want them to really like and support you. You shouldn't be like the head writer of a show and say, I hate all the toxic fans. I want to piss them all off, and that's what show I'm going to make. Like, I don't think that's coming at it from a good position. And so I think that they should have maybe started with a show that was a lot more like Next Generation, like the Orville, like it has that feeling, that essence of Star Trek. And then if they want to go and explore the Star Trek universe is big enough, they could get some cred, some trust from that. This is like our cherished childhood franchise. We want you to treat it right and treat it with just. And I feel like if they had started off showing us that they were someone that, could handle that and could trust with that, then I would absolutely love to see them go down like in another spin-off show that they were to do, then maybe they could do something more radical.
I mentioned it a few times already, but I say it again. I would like to be the fly on the wall during the business meetings where they tell the higher-ups, we make a new Star Trek show, we piss off nearly more than 60-70% of the fan base, and then we milk them.
Oh gosh, Yeah,
It's a ingenious idea.
you're really laying that one on thick, I can tell. But yeah, why is your approach to hate fans and want to piss them off and be like, oh, I don't like they're just kind of digging their heels in, I think, in some ways. But I feel like the lower decks, like they actually brought someone in who was passionate about Star Trek. He got into writing by making what was that? TNG season 8. Basically, he's just someone who's a true fan. He's a fan true and true. And he got to hire his own people and do kind of like his project was so small scale enough that the other people didn't really care what he did. And here he is making better Star Trek than we've had in forever. And then like I don't know, like to me Star Trek right now feels like an expensive Twitter rant. And okay, fine, have your rant about something. But Twitter is something that is so short and surface level in my I'm sorry, I don't mean to like diss people on Twitter, but I feel like just the platform and the idea of itself of being like limited to something really small and just the fact that so many people get into so many like arguments and they want to get, it's sort of like a bullhorn for people. And I feel like, this reputation of Twitter rants, as a phenomenon, I feel like that's kind of what Star Trek is turning into. And that would be okay if it had some nuance. Like, this is bad. And I'm like, in many ways, I agree with what they're saying, but I want to like be presented a really cool argument and be like examine both sides of things, or like, just treat it with like, I don't want to be told this is bad. I want to be like shown why this is bad or why things should be like, why, like, I want them to make an argument and then just say their thesis without backing it up with nuance. Sorry.
No problem. I think Saturn and I have the same thoughts, basically.
Yeah.
We want our good old Star Trek back.
What did you think of the Picard trailer?
Yeah.
Haven't seen it yet, actually.
Oh.
The problem is, I always have hope that the new season is better, and it's most of the time it's better, but only 5%. And every time they release a new series or finish a new seasons, you hear on the internet, well, at least it was better than Discovery Season 1. That's not a good measurement.
I don't know about you, but I feel like Discovery got worse its second season. Like, I liked the first few episodes, but after that it went really downhill, even worse than season 1.
Yeah, definitely. I have a really hate relationship with that show, but I think we shouldn't go into that subject any longer.
Right, yeah. Like, I don't want to be negative.
I also don't want to be negative all the time, but they are making it too easy.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
I mentioned this on Reddit a few days ago. It's not about the one mistake on the bridge, the ugly uniform there, the wrong character at the wrong place. No, it's not about that. It's the amount of mistakes, plot holes, the suing of fans, the stealing of fans even. They have so many bad problems at the moment that it's hard to love their stuff.
Absolutely. It is. And also something that I really loved about, the modern, I call it modern Trek, but really it's like TNG through Enterprise. The showrunner of that, Rick Berman and people under him, well, of course they had faults that many YouTubers have gone into. I always loved the idea that they were treating Star Trek as a historical fiction piece too. Like they actually they hired people and they did the research to like make sure that it like felt right. I'm okay with like some inconsistencies and some changes stuff, but I don't like want to see like if I'm watching a Civil War movie, I don't want to see like Fast and the Furious crew like with talking on cell phones all of a sudden. It's just going to be like, this is going to take me out of what I know about the universe. And so like, that's going to get me to start nitpicking. But then you're right. There's also plot holes. It's inconsistent with itself. And we could rant on and on about this. But,
definitely. Yeah. So let's end this, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. We
can meet in the future, of course, especially if you have new information. We would like to hear that.
Yeah. I'm going to be a bit busy the next year or two. I've got a pretty intense schooling ahead, but I really want to keep this alive and keep this going, and it's going to be slow, but hopefully it's going to be the turtle that comes in at the end.
Well, we wish you the best of luck, and thank you for all your efforts, and yeah, maybe we hear each other in the future again,
or as they say, Kopla.
Kapla. Take care, guys.
Okay, let's say the sentence. That's it for this video. Leave us a comment, tell us what you think about the game, and of course, play the game. Until next time.